So welcome everyone. My name is Mary O'Mara. I am the Executive Director for the Department of Special Needs Ministries for the Archdiocese of Washington. And I work with a Center for Deaf Ministries. We have a Center for Persons with Disabilities. We have an outreach for folks that are blind. We have an outreach for veterans. And we work with prenatal diagnoses, young families that are just learning that a pregnancy might be complicated and have an adverse prenatal diagnosis. We work with folks with mental health struggles and AIDS and HIV. So that's the kind of the bracket of what our department covers. And this afternoon what we're going to be talking about is faith formation with and for students with special needs. So welcome everyone, and can I ask who here works in faith formation in their parish, on a parish level? Fantastic, fantastic. And do any of you or many of you already have students that you're working with special needs?
Does that include our own children?
And your own children, parents.
Serious, I'm not making a joke.
No, okay, so parents often are some of our best catechists because they have a very deep and resonating understanding of exactly what we're doing. So you can help me along here this afternoon as we go through. What I'd like to do, if it's all right with you, is go ahead and go right through our presentation and leave as much time at the end for questions and conversation. So if that sounds like a plan, and does everybody have a handout there right at the door if you are looking for a handout so that you can follow along, okay? So we're going to go ahead and get started, and the first thing that I wanted to ask about is who might be familiar with the concept of a universal design for learning. Is this something that you've already heard of? Okay, so a universal design for learning, it kind of makes sense. It's logical to think of it in that way. What we're talking about is an approach or a curriculum design that embraces all learners. So it's not targeted for students with special needs, yet it casts a net that is wide enough that it supports and is affirmative for students with all kinds of manners of learning. So that could be different abilities, age, gender, culture, linguistic backgrounds. It's a blueprint, it's not a specific curriculum. So you might be using an array of various curriculums, all of which could be of a universal design. So it is more of the umbrella category. It is not a specific curriculum. So you could use different curriculums within the concept of a universal design. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and who are these students that would have a need for such a design in their curriculum. So we have multiple means of learning. There are many different ways that children can learn and students can learn. So the foundation principles of this are the multiple means of representation. So we have using a variety of methods to present information, multiple means of action, providing learners with alternative ways to act skillfully and to demonstrate what they know. Because oftentimes what we're lacking is a way for the student themselves to express that they do comprehend everything that is going on. We assume that there is not an understanding where quite often our students are grasping, they just don't have a way to express the fact that they are understanding what's going on. And multiple means of engagement, so tapping into the learner's interests by offering choices of content and tools, motivating learners by offering adjustable levels of challenge. And oftentimes, it's so true that we think that our students that learn differently, we might have to lower the level for them. That's not the truth. We oftentimes miss the mark and we are not challenging our students enough because we're lowering the level way too low. They're ready for much more. They're yearning for much more. It just might be that we need to learn different and varied ways of presenting the material. Not that we need to water down the material. We just have to think of creative ways of presenting the material. So what can we do, or how can instructors incorporate this universal design? So multiple strategies to present content. There are multiple ways that we can teach. Some of the ways that would be most obvious would be music and role play, cooperative learning, hands-on activities, field trip, guest speakers, web-based. You get the idea. Variety enriches all the time. So the more variety that you have in the way that you're presenting your curriculum, the better chances you're going to have of hitting onto a way that will work with a variety of learners. Not every learner is going to catch on to the same methods. Yet, if you're using multiple methodologies, you're going to strike gold. And once you strike gold, then you know where to build from. So these are the strengths of the universal design. And additionally, using a variety of materials as well. So using online resources, videos, podcasts, PowerPoint, music, art, manipulatives, all help. So use the use of music, the use of a lot of manipulatives that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. These are all ways that are targeted to reach students that are learning differently. And none of this, again, is rocket science. Some of it is just things that you would probably do organically. Or how many of folks here are parents? And how many of you find that what works with one of your children works globally with all of your kids? Okay, I'm not alone, right? So as we're raising our children, we find what the key is to that person. And then we are able to really support and grow that person. And in the same way, in our classroom, we have to find that key. We have to find what it is about that learner that is going to really let them bloom and grow and be successful. And in the same way that none of our own children are alike, none of the learners that we will have are alike either. So it's all about just finding those keys and finding those ways to make it work. We have to make sure that we're providing cognitive supports. So giving students clues along the way. And again, all of this really is kind of second nature to many of you who might be teachers already. And how many of you are professional educators? So a lot of this is what you have already learned as professional educators, but explaining what the main points are going to be, here's what we're going to talk about today. And when we're done talking about these things, then we are going to have a quiz, and we will review before the quiz. So as you're laying it out, letting them know what's going to happen, knowing what to expect is going to calm the nerves of many of our learners and enable them to focus a little better because they're not worried about what's going to happen next when it's all been laid out for them. So a lot of these are skills that work in any situation and are not specific to any learning methodology, but really work globally. Teaching to a variety of learning styles. I think we have all heard about that. There are many different ways that we learn. Some are visual learners, some are auditory learners, some learn by doing, some learn by feeling, some learn by different manners. Making sure that when we're planning our lesson plans that we engage all of those together. And providing flexible opportunities for assessment. That's one thing that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the standards. And to know that the assessment for the standards, also there should be room to say you can make adaptations for that. There is no reason that you have to have the standards assessed in the same way that all of the other students have an assessment. You can work one-on-one with the student and ensure that an assessment is done that is going to meet the needs of that student so that they're supported and included in the parish assessments. So what are some of those learning styles? And as we're looking at some of these, I'd like for you to imagine some of the learners that you currently have, whether they're children, students, or whether they're adults that you might be supporting in RCIA or marriage prep or adult faith formation. So as we're looking at these learning styles, who can think of someone who might learn through music that they might have? Can you think of somebody that's got a lot of beat and is always sitting in their chair and moving in their chair and singing and bursting into song? That happens quite a bit, that we have kids that just have music going around in their heads all the time. A lot of our typical learners learn wonderfully through music as a medium. We also have those that learn through linguistics, or those that learn through body movement and moving along. There are a lot of kids that just have got to stand up. How many of you have students in your classroom that could not possibly sit for a 45-minute session?
I can't sit for 45 minutes.
I can't sit for 45 minutes, yes. So a lot of this is just learning how to go with the flow and to not see it as a problem. It's just different. It is not a problem. It's just different. So if your student needs to get up and kind of get the jiggles out for a few seconds, it's a little better to just let them do that than to fight it all the time. And you'll find that the student then becomes more relaxed. There's more learning that's going on. So we all have students that have these different traits and these different learning styles in our classroom. What happens when these students grow up? Just as we're thinking about these students, excuse me, as we think about these students, these kids all grow up, and who do they become? So this is like a very interesting study to look at those kids that are so wiggly in their seats when they're younger, that we might think of as maybe being a little ADD or ADHD. Those are going to be your future firefighters and police officers and have these jobs. These are people you want to be friends with. These are not people that you want to kind of tick off when they're little kids. So the more that you come to know or even think about, who are these people now in your lives? Where are your adult children right now? Where do they fit on this wheel? Or where are your parents on this wheel? Or your siblings on this wheel? Or yourselves or your spouses? We all fit into one of these categories. We are not all book learners. We have never all been book learners. We have always had different ways of learning. So this is just embracing that fact, celebrating that fact, and moving forward with how we can then support students that need a little extra support in adapting a curriculum to ensure that they are going to be able to have the faith passed down to them as well. We all learn differently. All of us learn differently. It just means that we're making a little extra effort to come up with more creative ways to be able to pass on the faith to learners that have special needs. So what might be a few practical tips as we're looking to be able to do that? So as we're looking here, we want to provide and set a routine. This is far more important than you can possibly imagine. Any student, especially students that are on the autism spectrum disorder, a routine is your best friend. If the learner knows what is going to happen first, second, third, and then we're done, you're going to be fine, because you can keep reminding them, we're going to do this and this and this, and then there's just one more thing before you go home to mom and dad. And if they know where they are in this routine, we're all going to gather, we're going to have opening prayer, we're going to read a Bible story, have an art activity, close in prayer, and go home. And even if that is a little list that's on your door, so that they know exactly where you are in the lesson, the more comfortable they are and the more willing they are to engage in the whole process of what's happening in the room. Manage the environment. This would be a nightmare environment for a student with autism, with lights coming at them, with lights in the ceiling. If you're not hearing it, there is a hum in this room which would be deafening to a student with ASD. What we might think of as background, very minor interruptions, for a person on the spectrum can be an absolutely disruptive setting to them that just blocks their ability to learn because they are so focused on what it is that is distracting them, be it the light or the sound, or maybe it's a breeze that keeps hitting them. So you have to be very, very aware of the environment. Keep it as simple as possible. Keep the lighting as simple as possible. A lot of classrooms that we use for religious education have things hanging from the ceilings, little pinwheels and things. That can be immeasurably distracting for a student on the spectrum. So we really want to be very conscious of what the room looks like and what the space looks like. Realistic class agendas, you can't sit for an hour, and you can't pack it. You're going to have to give them time to settle in. You're going to have to give them time to focus on what's happening. And the more you pack the agenda, the less chance you're going to have of actually being able to achieve that agenda. So simple is good. And making sure that you do one thing very, very well is your success, because then you can build. But when you're trying to do too much all at once, it all kinds of falls like sand. So doing one thing very well and using that as a building block ends up being your ally to a very successful learning environment for a student with special needs. Sharing the agenda, as we already talked about, maybe even have it as a graph somewhere in the room so the student knows what's happening. Simplify the language. So if you're in a room filled with children that might struggle with language, try to think of ways that you can repeat things that are familiar to the child. So if you're always going to say, when we meet at church, then always use that term. Instead of saying parish sometimes and church other times, things that we don't really think about very often, these can make big differences to our kids. That they can always feel like they know what's going on and that they're comfortable with what's happening. And the more simple and routine we keep their language, the more effective that is for the student to feel that they are in the know and embraced and part of what's going on. So that's a very important aspect as well in the use of language. And setting a calm and positive tone. So when Bobby's, jiggling his leg and you're stressing out about it and that's coming out in your face and it's coming out in your body language, other students are going to pick up on that, and what you're resonating out as anxiety is going to be replicated and rippled around the room. The calmer and the more laid back you are is going to be replicated and copied around the room. So if they're winding up, you need to wind down, because they'll pick up on that tone, and it's something that they will copy as well. Be joyful. We're sharing about our love for Jesus here. This is happy. Look, he's happy. How can you not be happy with this guy? So live out loud, be joyful, be happy. I'm very sorry, that wasn't very nice. Jesus can sit over here. There he is. There we go. This is all about love and joy. That should be reflected in the way we greet the students. It should be reflected in the way we talk with one another. It should be reflected in the way we are as we're doing our lessons. This should just exude from all that we do. So be joyful all the time. Be generous with your praise. If a child is successful at something, even if it is a small accomplishment, the greater your praise, the more that child is going to be eager to try all the more. Because just that little bit of praise is all that child needs to be encouraged to continue in that direction. Listening to their words is when we really take the time that when there's a little jump off schedule here and we're talking about Christmas and baby Jesus being born, and they say, we have turkey at Thanksgiving, then just take a second to say, isn't that wonderful? We all enjoy Thanksgiving and having, thank you for telling us that. Just acknowledge it and go right back to where you're going. But don't say, we're not talking about Thanksgiving. Because right away, that's, another way that they feel as though I tried, but I didn't quite get it right. We can always go back without making them feel like they've made a mistake. But you can always go back to where you were. So provide that reassurance all the time that you're doing a great job, that we're all in this together, and that you're very, very happy to have them with you. Ensure that every child knows how much they are loved by God. Every child is a masterpiece. Pope Francis talks about children with disabilities and those in the margin as being God's masterpieces. What a beautiful way to describe what it is to be made in the image and likeness of God. And God does not make any mistakes. So we have to be willing and able and joyful to celebrate the many, many images of God. They're not all the same. They're all very, very different, and they're all equal in value and dignity in the eyes of God. Equal in value and dignity. So what is the church's teaching on persons with disabilities and about full access to the life of the church? In a word, it would be welcome. There is no separate church for persons with disabilities. We are one flock under a single shepherd. There is no separate church for persons with disabilities. We are all part of one body, one Lord, one baptism. So it is not only welcome, but of course. It should be of course. If we baptize these children, they are in the family. We shouldn't need to work to include them. They're already here. I'm not sure where we got to a point where we had to work to include those that we have baptized into the body. That's confusing to me. It's very confusing to me. We have baptized these children into the body of Christ. It is our responsibility to enable them to not only have the education they need, but to become the agents of catechesis that God calls them to be. Not just recipients, not just to be pew potatoes at Mass, but to share their giftedness, their joy, their devotion. We have a long way to go in this process, but it's up to us to be the agents of advocacy for that. It's up to us to ensure that we are not including people when, in fact, if we've baptized them, they're already here. It's about us making room for them to shine and share their giftedness with us. Ooh, okay. So where is that reflected? Our USCCB has written in 1978 a statement that's called the Pastoral Statement for a brief name. We would call it the Pastoral Statement, the best 10-minute read of your life. If you have not read this document, please log on to this website. You can download it for free as a PDF. It's a 10-minute read. It's a wonderful, wonderful read. This document was read on the Senate floor as they were deliberating how to put together our own ADA law in 1991. So our bishop's statement was used as a map for creating the ADA. So the church had it together before the government had it together. I think we still need to be that beacon of example and best practice. How can we be church and how can we be community? I think this quote is one that was shared by a parent that we serve in the Archdiocese of Washington, And it has always just been a very profound statement for me. Faith became our anchor, our strength, our compass, with a defined objective that leads us to defend our child's rights with all our might, to promote his quality of life and our families as a whole. So it's not just about advocating for the child, but it's also about embracing the family. Because in opening the doors of our church to ensure that this child that learns differently, or this child that is not a typical child, is loved and embraced, celebrated, valued, and welcomed into the life of the church, you've swung open the doors to the entire family. A family that might have been splitting their time, and mom goes to one mass and dad goes to another because somebody has to stay home with a child that might stim and be a distraction during mass. That's not a distraction. That's part of our body. It's part of who we are. So we need to start thinking about this in terms of serving an entire family, not just serving the student or the learner themselves, but the whole family of that learner as well. So every person bears God's image. Every person is a unique gift from God, and every person has a need to express their spiritual nature, nurtured by faith in Jesus. Do you think that persons, especially those with significant cognitive disabilities, don't have a capability of understanding the love of God? I think sometimes the most profound manifestation of what that love means comes from some of our loved ones that have the most significant disabilities. Because it's in that simplicity of pure love that we recognize how far we have to go ourselves to get there. They become the teachers. We become the students. And that pure gift of love, so often, it's us that are taken aback in what it means to truly love God with all our hearts, all our minds, all our souls. We have a lot to learn from others. So to teach an individual with a disability, what we have to use are just a few measuring sticks, if you will. Compassion. Sometimes folks are coming from a hard place. If mom is exasperated or is, walking in with her ponytail on her side of her head and 2 different shoes on and dragging 3 other kids, think about where she was coming from to get all those kids out of the house and what it's like to be a 24/7 caregiver. And instead of saying, "Oh my, good morning," maybe say, "What can I do to help you today? Can I maybe walk some of your kids to where their classrooms are?" Be a little bit compassionate about who it is that's standing in front of you. Understanding of a spectrum of differences. Not every child on the autism spectrum is going to be the same. Please don't ever think that's true. When you have met one student with a disability, you've only met that one. There are so many different ways and different manifestations. You can't say, "Oh, I've worked with a child that's blind, so I know everything about that." You know about that one child. The next child you meet is going to be a completely new encounter. It's very exciting if you embrace it that way. It can be very inhibiting if you think about it as every new student is a new adventure, but it's true. So embrace differences because it's going to be different with every student that you teach. Acceptance. Welcome all of those who accompany them by your positive verbal and nonverbal behavior. So, that family might be a little brisk sometimes. Well, that's because everywhere they go, they have to fight. School is a fight. Boy Scouts is a fight. Sports is a fight. All they do is argue for a place for their child to belong. So when they come to your religious education program and their hands are on their hips and they're like, I want my child to be here, don't be surprised, be accepting of their journey. It's been a difficult one. And so we should be the one that's different. We should be the one that says, yes, the answer is yes, and we're going to figure it out together. Let's work together. I don't know what that yes is going to look like today, but the answer is yes, and we're going to figure it out together. That affirmative, positive response is going to just take the tension right away and allow you to begin in relationship with that family. Respect, again, the individual gifts that every person brings, because everyone has gifts to share. Everyone has gifts to share. Tolerance, to recognize and allow for deficits. So if something isn't done perfectly, that's okay. Because, love is not always found in perfection, is it? Love is often found in the imperfect, but we love it anyway. Patience, willingness to listen and to understand all these differences, because they'll be coming at you constantly. I don't know everything about disabilities. I'm still learning about the different, even combinations of disabilities. There's no two cases that are ever going to be the same. And high expectations, this is really an important one. Don't lower your expectations because a student has a special need. You might have a student on the spectrum that is way brighter than you are. Way brighter than you are. And so don't think that if you lower your expectations, you're helping that child. You might be frustrating that child, because their ideas and their ability to understand is very, very strong. So if you're lowering expectations, you're going to be frustrating the student. So remember that the idea isn't to lower the expectations and see where you go. The idea is to keep the bar high and find ways that you can creatively make that work for everybody. Using kid-first language, this is something that is very, very important, especially to parents. A parent doesn't want to hear that autistic kid. That is their child, and the child has a name, and the child comes first, and then whatever that disability is. So if you were to say children who are deaf, or children on the spectrum, that's fine, but not that deaf kid. That's kind of harsh for a parent to hear. Just to make sure that we're being very respectful of individuals. People are not defined by their appearance or their ability. I wouldn't want to be known as that lady in glasses. I would want to be known by my name, and the fact that I wear glasses is just part of who I am. In the same way, anyone with any disability wants to be known by their name, and then learn about how that disability is woven into the fabric of who that person is. So some thoughts on definitions. This is a very powerful one that was shared by Mary Jane Owen, that disabilities are the normal and anticipated outcome of the risks, stresses, and strains of the living process. They are neither unique or rare. 20% of the population has a disability. It shouldn't be shocking to find out that there are students in your class that have a disability. 20% of our general population has a disability, or so says the Center for Disease Control. So it shouldn't be any big surprise that we have these kids in our classrooms. So in that, I think it's important for us to remember that these are just all part of the norm of life. It's not something that is different. It's just part of a big mosaic of what the body of Christ looks like. There is nothing wrong about it. It's just part of this beautiful mosaic that makes up our church. And for parishes that say, I don't have anybody with a disability in my parish, how many of you have heard your pastors say that? Sadly, it does happen. Statistically, it's impossible. And when we look at the CDC saying that the autism numbers right now are 1 in 68, and they're actually getting to be more like 1 in 58, that's pretty much impossible for anyone to claim that there is no one in their parish with a disability. So language of behavior. We have children that are with us that are nonverbal, and by nonverbal I don't mean deaf. Children that are deaf use sign language. That is a way to communicate. So children that are deaf are not nonverbal. What I mean are children that have no expressive language. We have some kids that can hear but are not able to speak. But there are ways that we can help them. Some of the tools that we have over here with the Loyola Press tools will show you ways that we can communicate with children that are nonverbal, where they can use cards to communicate, iPads to communicate. There are many different tools and assistive learning devices that help students that are nonverbal to speak. Here are some that are here. iPads for the confessional. Did you know that that's allowed?
I'm a pastor and I do that with the kids.
There you go. And tell us what your experience is with that. Is it problematic, Father, or it's been fine?
It's fine. It's wonderful.
Do you
Hallelujah.
use a particular app or
You know what? I think my catechists
Put it together for you.
Everything that you have over there, like we have the Loyola adaptive.
Yeah.
So we have good choices and bad choices, and the children actually take their act of contrition into the confessional with them. It's all out on a sheet, and they have good choices and bad choice cards, and they can show their priest, oh, I monkey bit my sister again. So then, it's up to Father to say, you shouldn't really be monkey biting your sister. But these are ways that children are able to communicate that are not using verbal methods. They're using icons and pictures, assistive technology to do that. And I'm so pleased that we have a pastor with us here that's able to say, and it's working for him. That's a beautiful testimony. So thank you for telling us that.
And it's a beautiful thing too, is not only watching the parents of the child, but also watching the grandparents that are present there and crying and seeing their grandson or their granddaughter receiving reconciliation, receiving Eucharist, or receiving confirmation. It just makes you feel good, like about who you are and what you're doing.
Very, very powerful thing. Very powerful thing. So here are some of the national resources that we have available. The National Catholic Partnership on Disability has a wonderful, deep, and rich website. Please explore that. Loyola Press is here and downstairs. They're all the way in the back near where the coffee is being served. Please go and look at the complete curriculum. They have it here. And Dayton is also here today. So if you have any questions, Dorothy is here from Dayton, where we have a certificate in catechist training for persons with disabilities. The Archdiocese of Washington, with Jose, has developed a wonderful curriculum standards that are being used for the Archdiocese. These standards ensure that all is caught within whatever curriculum you choose to use. So this is not a curriculum itself. These are standards which ensure that all of the main points of catechesis are covered. And it's a very deep and rich resource that allows you to go through and to ensure that you are capturing all of the points that are needed no matter what curriculum you are using. So the standard-based curriculum, which I'm not saying that there's any one better than another, I'm just saying that if you're using the standards with your curriculum, that a standard is a term that defines a cumulative body of knowledge and a set of competencies that is the basis for the quality of education. Standards express what all program participants should know and be able to do, but do not dictate how they are to be taught. So it doesn't tell you what curriculum you have to use. It just says, here are the points that should be covered in first grade, in second grade, in third grade, in fourth grade, all the way down to 8. It does go through to 12, correct, Jose? It goes all the way through to 12. And it lays it out for you so that no matter what curriculum you are using, you can back check to make sure that you're covering each of these points. It is a very, very powerful tool, no matter whether you are using it with your students who have special needs or if you're using this with your typical children. So in creating this curriculum guide, the Archdiocese of Washington, in our Office of Catechesis, has pulled together the pillars of the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the 6 tasks of catechesis found in the General Directory for Catechesis to find measurable grade level standards for each concept and task. It is all laid out and made very, very, very clear. I'm not sure how well, can you see this slide clearly? Is that, okay. So faith knowledge assessment is a Catholic standards-based assessment developed by the Archdiocese of Washington, aligned to their religious education curriculum guide, Forming Disciples for the New Evangelization. In creating the guide, the Archdiocese of Washington's Office of Catechesis and the Catholic Schools Office integrated the pillars of the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the 6 tasks of catechesis here. And they define measurable grade level standards for each of the concepts and for each of the tasks. Jose?
In the Archdiocese for the Military Services, the assessment is called the AMS Family Faith Assessment. So, and in the Archdiocese of Washington, it's called
Faith Assessment.
Faith
Correct.
Knowledge Assessment.
Faith Knowledge Assessment. However, with both the AMS, correct me if I'm wrong, but with both the AMS and the Archdiocese of Washington, we work with the DREs for our children with special needs to ensure that whatever adaptations need to be made for those students with special needs are made. So the faith assessment isn't in stone for our kids. We can find creative ways to have that assessment done that is a little outside of the lines of the way that it's done for all of the typical children. So there are ways to work with that as well. Given these standards then, there is one way that we can work with our students with special needs. Oh, this is just what they look like. I wanted to give you a little picture of what they look like. So this would show you what pillar it is from and what the goal of that particular standard is and what it is that you're looking to reach with that standard. So it is all very, very clearly laid out. And with using that curriculum then, how can we, with using the standards then, how can we kind of reach out to our children that have different ways of learning? There are many different programs that are out there. Dayton has programs that have been around for a very long time. The National Catholic Office for the Deaf has resources. The National Catholic Partnership on Disabilities has resources. Loyola Press just came out with Adaptive Finding God, which is the first complete curriculum from 1 to 6 for not just triaging at the sacraments. For the longest time, all that we had were, oh my goodness, Billy's ready for First Communion. We don't have anything for Billy. So we had to scramble to get something to prepare him for First Communion. We were triaging at the sacraments instead of thinking more globally on how to support a child all the way through the religious education program. So Adaptive Finding God is a comprehensive faith formation program that can be adapted or customized to serve children with a variety of special needs. It has multi-sensory tools and creative approaches so that children with special needs can learn according to their unique learning styles. So this is the curriculum that we're talking about that's downstairs. If you would like to see the whole thing, then visit Loyola Press's booth, please, because they have wonderful things.
I will say that it is a really, really good program. The parish where my office is, that's what they use.
Okay.
All of the teachers love it.
Yes.
Because they've all got, 1, maybe 2 kids in there.
Absolutely.
And so they're teaching and they just kind of throw in that, and it's really well done.
So you bring up a very good point. oftentimes, thinking about that universal design, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. If this is supporting your students with special needs, your typical kids are gonna love it too.
They do.
So, I mean, this is a wonderful thing that supports not only kids with special needs, but it also supports the typical children in the classroom as well. They find it engaging and invigorating, and it kind of brightens up the whole lesson, certainly. So there are different ways that we can do this, and we try to honor all of the settings. So the first would be, many of our dioceses are very, very rural, so we have to accommodate and support those that do a home-based curriculum. Often just, especially in the military archdiocese, with very remote locations, sometimes providing the resources for somebody who is unable to come to any sort of a center-based program, you have to be able to make adaptations so that you can support a family that is providing catechesis in their own home. A second way to do that then would be the one-on-one, where the child would come to the center, but maybe they have a one-on-one catechist that might be a teenager that they're working with in the parish, or it could be just a one-on-one catechist situation. The next way to think about that would be if you have a group program with children with special needs, so a group of children with special needs together, and they're all working with a catechist. This can often be a challenge because there's no group that is going to be all vanilla. You're going to have all kinds of differences within that group. But many parishes try to do it this way, to put all of their kids with special needs together. In some cases, it works great. In other cases, it can be very difficult. What we have found works wonderfully in this setting is that if you begin as a group, and then you have one-on-one teenagers with each individual child, and then you close out as a group. And that way you're meeting the needs of each of the individual kids at the same time being together in community. Another way that this can work is part-time adaptive. So if you come together as a special needs class and then you go into a partial inclusion program where you mainstream in with the typical kids for part of the class and then come back and close out together with the special needs kids. And then full inclusion would be the last option, where you actually have a child that's fully mainstreamed into the program with all of the typical children. What is very important to remember, all of you pre-Vatican II babies, is there's no good, better, best here going on. So there's nothing here to say that one of these is any better than the other, or the child that can make it to the fully inclusive setting is the child that's made it. That's not the way that it works at all. And it's especially important to remember that there could be a reason that a child that is being very successful in a full inclusion model might not work for a while because maybe they've had a long-term illness and they've had to be away for some time. And so you've had to pull them back out of that program. You wouldn't want them to think that they've failed or slid or stepped back. So it's always very important to affirm and to celebrate any way that you choose to present the curriculum, and that there is no sense of good, better, best in this one. That it is all about what works for that child. There's no one way that is better for another. There's only one way that is best for that particular child. So you can use the the Loyola Press materials either on the hands-on level or on the adapted grade level. So they actually go side by side with Finding God. So adaptive Finding God can be used with Finding God and used just as an augmentation, much like what you were saying, that the students are all using the same curriculum and it's augmented then by the adaptive Finding God materials. Or it could be used as a standalone curriculum just with the hands-on. So the hands-on comes in a box, and that box is like a one-box kit with all of the lesson plans that are on cards that look like this. And it's everything you need from level 1 to level 6 in a box. All the manipulatives come in the box, everything is together. So to do that, it's not tied to any grade level. So if you have an 8-year-old, that doesn't mean that they have to be in 1st or 2nd grade. It could be that that 8-year-old is really in first grade or kindergarten, and we need to back up a little bit. So it's not anything that you need to tie to by age, and you can just work with the child where the child is at that time. So it's not tied to a grade level, but it offers concrete and flexible lessons that are not retrofits of any existing grade level lesson. It provides teachings of the Catholic faith that are distilled to their clearest form. That was not easy to do. It took years and years and years, and a lot of us sitting around a table for a long time to take complicated theological premises and get them down to their most concrete form and clearest way to teach them. And lessons are not necessarily presented in a linear fashion so that the order is flexible and can be repeated. So often there are many of our learners that we just need to go back and do it again. And that's, again, there's nothing wrong with going back and doing it again. And that's important to remember, that the more that we repeat things, the better it is for all of the students. Again, going back to that universal design. The standards are met through the curriculum. So the standards that we just talked about, all of those standards are met through the Loyola Press Adaptive Finding God curriculum. Bishop Nestout, when I brought this in, he's our auxiliary, and I was so excited. It was like Christmas, and the box arrived, and I was like ripping it open downstairs, and he came in, because I was just so excited. He wanted to see what was in this box. And I was like, look at Jesus, isn't he cute? Look, the cardinals on the cards, this is so exciting. And he said, pan-faced, does it fit with our standards? And I was like, oh my God. So he's standing there looking through the book. And he was like, okay, Mary, it fits with the standards. I was like, oh, thank you, Bishop Nesto. Did you want to see?
The same thing happened in the Office of Evangelization and Catechesis in the Archdiocese for the Military Services. I was opening the box, and my colleagues went all wild with Jesus in the box.
And you were, does it match the standards? Yeah, so.
We knew it matched.
You knew it matched, okay. But yes, I was the one that was going gaga over getting Jesus out and all the cards and all the toys, and Bishop Nestout was going through every standard to make sure that we met, so whew, we met the standard.
By the way, Loyola Press is working on a curriculum correlation.
Yes.
To the adapted version as well.
So that will be perfect. You'll be able to match it all the easier, instead of having to go through it to find out. Here are some of the pieces that you will find inside that curriculum kit. So these are the manipulatives. These panoramas are fantastic. And a little piece of gold that I learned. Are you familiar with Playmobil, a toy called Playmobil? Playmobil is perfectly to scale with these panoramas. So if you have Noah's Ark, or if you have the nativity scene, or if you have any of the other Playmobil religious toys, they work perfectly with these panoramas. We had the best Christmas at the Deaf Center because the kids were so excited to get out all of their little toys to do the nativity scene. And the backdrops are absolutely gorgeous. And we have had the best time with those scenes. And we've been able to do so much storytelling with those scenes. That's my favorite thing that's in the kit. And just so you know, Playmobil is perfectly to scale with that. There's some music that's in both English and Spanish, Order of the Mass, and a floor puzzle. The concept stories, are you familiar with social stories? For children with autism spectrum disorder, social stories are very, very important. The beautiful thing about the way that Loyola Press did this is understanding children who are on the spectrum, especially in explaining something like Good Friday. It can be very scary to see Jesus like hanging on a cross, and it freaks them out more than it would freak out a typical student. But Loyola Press has added at the bottom of the page, don't worry, it's not the end of the story. Don't be afraid, it's not the end of the story. Recognizing that that can be terrorizing to a child that learns visually like that, and they think they haven't turned the page yet, so they don't know that it's going to be okay. It's Good Friday, but Easter's coming, Michael? Yes? Amen? They don't know that yet. They don't know that yet. So Loyola Press was very sensitive about making sure that there are little sentences that are put in there on any page that might be intimidating to a learner that would see a picture and be frightened by it, to say, it's okay. So that's a beautiful thing that they did. Here are some more of the tools. So more examples are the picture cards and flip books, foam puzzles, instructional cards, movement mats, an accordion book, and a rosary kit. The rosary kit is also another really big hit. And of course, since my boss is on the picture cards, we just had to make sure that his face is out there too. So the picture cards come in so handy when you're trying to explain to a child what something is that you don't have in front of you. If you can show a picture, it just makes so much more sense. So those are actually a very important thing. There's no right way. So we've kind of talked about this afternoon. Each parish or cluster of parishes is going to have their own flavor of presenting a curriculum. So stay within the standards as your base, and you're going to be good. So just make sure you stay within the standards, and you're going to be fine. And then play in all of those lived experiences. And through the lived experiences, the story of our own lives, we learn how to reveal the holy. And then how do we live out what we have lived together? And how can we commit that to prayer and call it to action? So all of this is all about finding ways to take abstract concepts and create them into things that students that learn differently can embrace and understand easily. That's our goal here, is to take something that is very, very abstract and ensure that a student that learns differently is going to be able to understand it and own it as theirs. Down the hall, Dorothy is talking about the University of Dayton's Certificate in Disability Ministry. So if you have any questions about that, Dorothy, is here. There is a 5-course certificate that delves into explaining a 5-week course on deafness, on autism, on ADHD, on lifelong catechesis, and an overview course. So if you want to learn any more about those disabilities so you can better support the students in your classes, that certificate is available. Jose?
Yeah, on the AMS website, www.millarch.org, there is detailed information and links to BLCFF.
And Jose was very, very helpful in working with me and Dayton to ensure that we were able to get this certificate up and running. So Jose has been quite the advocate for disabilities for many, many years. So here's some contact information on how you can reach me, which is in your packet there. And with what time we have, do we have questions?
Yeah, Mary, last year you said that the bishops were putting together a new pastoral statement on disabilities and it might come out this year. Do you know if there's any update on
They
that?
were looking to revamp it, and from what I understand from the last bishops' conference, it has not been touched yet. It wasn't even on the fall agenda. It was not on the fall
The
agenda.
pastoral statement for...
They were, because it's 1978, they were going to just look at it to revise some of the language, I think, and to add some things to it that were not even relevant in 1978.
Because that's like a little like...
Yes, it certainly is, yeah. It didn't make the agenda, though. Yes?
I'm noticing a lot this year that a lot of my students have severe anxieties.
Mm.
It seems really big this year. Is there anything I can do in general? Because I'm in like an assistant director, so in general to just kind of help those students and those teachers, like it's, anxieties where they won't even set foot in the building, where they won't leave their home, or things like that.
And why? I mean, I think that that's something that's so outside of us, and we live at such a pace that this is happening more and more, that young people are feeling so anxious about engaging in anything because they already feel inhibited that they won't be able to perform, or they won't be able to meet the... So I think the more welcoming and warm and calm that you can be in making a very personal ministry of accompaniment, a one-on-one ministry of accompaniment, will mean that a student is going to feel safe enough to be engaged. But it's all about feeling safe, isn't it? It's about feeling as though you're not just a sheep in the crowd, but that somebody is going to meet you at the door and know your name. Those are the things that really can make a huge difference. We're seeing more and more kids with lots of anxiety struggles, though. You're right. Michael?
two things. This morning, I went to have breakfast, and the guy assumed that I would not want breakfast from the buffet table. And I asked him why. And he said, well, I just assume that you're not going to order that because here's the menu. I said, well, you should never assume just by my looks that this is what's going to take place. And, I had to really remind him. And I was like, it was hurtful because I'm like, come on, we're beyond that.
We are so beyond.
A lot of learning that needs to take place within our own society.
Absolutely.
We continue to look at the people and then we exclude them from not being able to do something.
Absolutely.
I can still order from the buffet table, and there's many ways I can get up to the buffet table, and if I can't get up to the buffet, I can tell you what I want from the buffet table.
That's right.
But, all of that. That's number one. Number two, though, you mentioned about the, incorporating, those who have challenges in the classroom. How can we do that? How can we include them in the content of the liturgy? I know you said that it could be intimidating, but I just feel that
Tomorrow morning, 8:30, Michael. That's our topic tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Oh.
We're going to be talking about from access to belonging. So it's not just all about finding a curriculum that's going to work for our students, but how do we embrace, affirm, celebrate, welcome, and value persons with disabilities in the life of the church? And that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow morning at 8:30. Is that 8:30?
8:30. And in case you're not able to make it to 8:30 tomorrow morning, check the www.millarch.org. This is going www.millarch.org. That's the website. These presentations will be on the Digital Media Center.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm going to check out www first.
Yeah, triple W.
Will that include strategies on how to catechize, beat up, or otherwise encourage your congregation not to say to that mother, why did you bring that child to Mass?
I would recommend Deacon Sutton's book, and then the other Loyola book from the family, because those, and if you get by and read those and have your pastor read those, it comes from the pulpit, and it's just.
The one thing is that it's got to come from the pulpit. The other thing is your ushers. Just this, we're going to talk about this tomorrow morning. But your ushers can either be it can either be a gateway to heaven or a gateway out the door. So it really has to be that we do an usher training. And I'll tell you from my own parish, we had a mom with two daughters, one on the spectrum, one typical child. It was Christmas Eve, 7:30 Mass, so you imagine the mayhem. Her typical daughter was an altar server, and she was sitting in the back with her 12-year-old on the spectrum who was freaking out because there were so many people, they weren't sitting in their regular seat, everything looked very different, and she was making noises.
Yeah.
Someone actually asked her to leave.
No way.
Asked her to leave her own parish, and this was someone that was a Christmas and Easter person that just wanted the seat. Asked her to leave because this young woman who was on the spectrum was making noises. Praise God, our pastor was there at the time, and he invited the gentleman to another seat and reminded the mom and the daughter how very loved and cherished they were. And if they would like to sit up front, he would ask somebody else to move so they could have a seat up front. So one, it welcomed this man, it gave him a seat, but it also put this young woman and her mother at the front. So that one, the young girl was a little less stressed because she wasn't in the middle of this big, huge crowd, but it came from the pastor. It came from the pastor. And Michael, you know what I would say, never about us without us. You're talking about somebody telling you whether you want to have food from the buffet or not. Really. I just came back from the Eucharistic Congress in Cebu. It was an amazing experience, and I coordinated all of the disability work that happened for the Congress in Cebu. And we had a deaf priest that was there from Korea. His name is Father Min Soo Park. He's deaf. He has no other disabilities. He's brilliant. 2 PhDs. And we were going up to registration, and I was interpreting for Father Min so he could get his interpreting material. He could get his registration materials. And they looked at him, and he said, "You're deaf." And Min said, "Yes, I'm deaf." So they handed him the whole program in Braille. His eyes, you can see. It's all right. So we all have a long way to go. We all have a long way to go.
The idea is that, and I think you brought it up a real good point, and I don't know how well it sets to everybody, but if God created us all, and we believe that, we all been baptized, there really is no special need.
Absolutely.
It's really not.
Absolutely.
There's really
One church.
It's one church, there's nobody who, no money. When you talk about the statistics about 20 people, everybody in their mama in church have a disability.
Yep.
In some kind of form, and I just wish that we could, I just know that I've gone through a lot of circles. I've been on crutches since I was a baby, 61 years old. And there was a time in my life where someone actually said to me that, that God loves you and God wants to see you healed. And I had to tell that person, well, I believe I'm already healed.
That's right. Go you, Michael.
And yet that person wrestled with that comment, and but you got crutches. I said, yeah, but I'm healed. God loves me.
That's right.
I'm healed. And that concept of allowing us to grow as a community, to recognize that everybody created by God is healed. They are perfectly, wonderfully made.
Mm-hmm.
Is what Psalm 139 talks about.
That's exactly right.
Wonderfully made, fearfully made. You know all about every bone, every part of my body. So I'm healed. So that embracing that teaching, was very difficult for me at times. But now I'm at the level where, I want to see other people do the same. I want to see other people get to that point. People on wheelchair who are claiming the Word of God. People on wheelchair can serve Eucharistic, be a Eucharistic.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
So come tomorrow morning, Michael, because we're going to talk about all those things tomorrow morning.
I know I won't be here tomorrow, but I just had to say that. Sorry.
And you're absolutely right. I'm so sorry that you won't be with us tomorrow, because a lot of the presentation tomorrow is pictures. So we're going to show the papal mass that was here in Washington. We had a young woman with Down syndrome do the first reading.
Philippians, she read that Philippians reading.
That was Megan Jones. We had a man who's profoundly deaf read one of the petitions. This is at the papal mass with the Holy Father. So if we're willing to say this is the body of Christ in the Archdiocese of Washington, and have Megan do a reading and have Hector read one of the petitions, we're all together in this. We're all together in this. Not wheelchairs lined up by the side so the Holy Father can walk by and kind of pat people on the heads, but be active, engaged participants in the life of the church. Not pew potatoes, active, engaged participants in the life of the church. Absolutely. Okay, I've kept you longer. You're missing your next workshop, but thank you all for your attention. Every time.